So, my name is Prashil, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about LG's journey through the smartphone game, up until their demise. Now, it is important to note that LG had some pretty pivotal moments that directly influenced the development of, well, all smartphones really. And to truly understand why and how, we gotta take it all the way back to 2007, the LG KE850 Prada. And before we get any further, it's gonna become pretty evident throughout this video that LG, while their phones were pretty decent, their naming game wasn't. And you'll soon realize this. But anyway, let's get into the video. The LG KE850 Prada, which, believe it or not, was the first phone with an actual capacitive touchscreen. They actually had just beaten Apple by a few months. But its real claim to fame was the fact that it could record 320 by 240 slow-mo footage at 120 frames per second. It was even stated that LG had sold over 300,000 units of this phone in Europe alone, and had actually outpaced Apple in this sense. Now, the fact that it was limited to just Europe really hurt LG's sales globally. Then came the LG KC910 Renoir. Renoir? Is it pronounced Renoir like the French artist? I can never tell with LG. But anyway, now this came out in 2008 and was the first full touchscreen phone with an 8 megapixel camera. Now, isn't that something? Now, believe it or not, it was actually the slimmest phone at the time, at about 14 millimeters thick. And not only this, it also had a built-in GPS for geotagging photos. Now, it's important to note that LG was the first manufacturer to actually achieve this feat. Now, I feel that this is actually the pattern of their later developed phones as well. They were always the first to achieve a certain feat in the smartphone game. Later on, the LG K900 Arena was thrown into the mix, which had an impressively sharp screen for the time, with a pixel density of 311 pixels per inch. And it was covered in the earliest generation Gorilla Glass, which is now widely the standard for smartphones everywhere. It also was one of the first phones to support multitasking at a time where the iPhone couldn't. And actually, come to think of it, even the new iPhones today can't fully multitask. It also featured Google Maps built in and came with a Microsoft Office package, which was the productivity cherry on top, I guess. And so this phone was pretty much a productivity beast. Coming shortly after, you had the LG BL40 New Chocolate. Seriously, how do they come up with this stuff? Anyway, this phone boasted a 4-inch screen with a 21:9 aspect ratio and supported Dolby Mobile, which was a great feature at the time for watching movies on the go. Although I'm not sure I would honestly spend 2 hours watching a movie on a 4-inch screen, but you know, to each their own, right? Another in the series of developments of LG phones was the LG Optimus. Alright, I'll give it to them. This one sounds kind of cool. The Optimus was a mid-range phone aimed at first-time smartphone users. So it's important to note that the Optimus series laid out the blueprint for what would later be transformed into the LG Optimus 2X. See what I did there? Anyway, the 2X was the world's first phone that featured a dual-core processor. How interesting is that? With the Optimus 2X's power being its highlighting feature, Nvidia even promised games from the Unreal Engine 3 and ID Tech Engine 5. So basically, you could have been running around playing Doom and Battlefield on your phone. Now, wouldn't that be crazy? But anyway, ultimately, it didn't come to fruition and the project was scrapped. But it is crazy to think what would have happened had they managed to get it to work. Later down the line, you had the LG Optimus G, which was the first widely available phone to feature the Snapdragon S4 Pro, the first quad-core processor used in a phone. Now, fun fact, the hardware in the Optimus G was actually used as the base for the Nexus 4, which was only $300, which was an absolute steal for the S4 Pro processor at the time, as competitors' devices costed about 2 to 3 times of that. Now we get to the G series, which is what my generation widely associates the LG smartphone lineup with. You have the LG G2, which was a bezel-less phone, or I guess you could say the bezel-less phone before it became cool and all the rage. During this time, LG also released the LG G Flex, and while it isn't like the foldable phones we're accustomed to now, everything on that phone flexed. The battery, the screen, the motherboard, and even the idea of a self-healing back panel just made this phone really, really interesting. If you had this phone in high school, it was the ultimate flex. Yeah, I went there. Now the LG G2, G3, and the G Flex, they were all really, really interesting phones, and I honestly love the design of the G2. And it was definitely something different in a time where it seemed that all smartphones were just heading in the pretty straightforward direction. Now, another notable phone in the lineup of LG phones was the LG G5, which was LG's take on the modular phone. Now, this unfortunately tanked, but it did show LG's ability to innovate and try new things. Now, the rest of the phones that superseded this lineup, like the G6 and the V series, are kind of bland for my taste and offered incremental upgrades, so they're not worth really talking about, and I'm pretty sure everybody's already heard of them by now. As you can see, LG has a long history of innovation, especially when it came to cameras, processors, and even screens, which are all essential components for a smartphone. However, despite being the first on so many occasions, like being the first to use an 8 megapixel camera, or the first to offer multitasking, or the first to use a dual-core powered processor in their phones, despite all these feats, it always felt like the company failed to be the first in the market. And that just leaves us with the question, how did they go from being the first on many occasions to never being the actual first in the market? And I would attribute that to the marketing, and the thing is, you can blame the marketing all you want, but how do you market something like the LG BL40 New Chocolate? I mean, that's just insane. And because of this, and I feel like it left a lot of consumers confused about which lineup each device belonged to. You know, with Samsung phones, you know if you're buying an S21, it's part of the S series or the Galaxy series. And you know if you buy a Note, you'll be part of the Note series and what they're good for. And you'll understand the difference between the Galaxy S series and the Note series. But with LG, I guess they kind of failed to do this. And it's honestly a shame, because LG, they were the first to a lot of great feats. Despite their great innovation and always being the first to attempt something new, all this failed to kind of shine through the bad marketing. And I feel like that's ultimately what led to LG's demise. So it is sad, but yeah, LG smartphones will be missed. I was a fan of the G series and even the V series. And hopefully, maybe someday they'll make a comeback. Who knows? I guess time will tell. Thank you so much for watching, guys and girls. I hope you learned something, and I hope you, give LG their props, because they deserve it. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.